Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at the current version of the North Coast Journal. And I'm joined today by news editor Thad Greenson and arts and features editor Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Matt.
And how you doing?
You know, I'm going along and getting along.
Sometimes that's all we can do.
Sometimes that is all we can do. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to crack on and talk about what's on the cover of the North Coast Journal this week.
Fantastic. One foot in front of the other. This week we have our annual green issue, which is a kind of showcase of different environmentally focused stories. And so that's the kind of themed cover, and then within that, the cover story this week is about the undamming and restoration of the Klamath River Basin.
Yeah, and it's a pretty big job, the job of restoring the river to health. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's happening on that front?
Yeah, so I mean, plainly, as somebody who has covered this thing for like 15 years now, this effort to see the Klamath undammed, I had not thought about it in this level of detail, and not really fully appreciated kind of the scope of the project until working on the story. And so a few weeks back, some of the officials involved with the Klamath River Restoration Corporation, that the nonprofit group that was formed to oversee dam removal, had a press conference and kind of informed the press that ground had broken on the project. And that was, kind of a little bit curious to me, because I was like, well, how is ground broken if you haven't taken any dams down yet? Like, what are we doing here? And they explained that, that there was basically a lot of preparation work that goes into just getting to the point where they can facilitate dam removal, and they can get all of the equipment and all of the personnel to the places they need to be, and they are kind of ready to launch these restoration efforts. So there's a lot of groundwork to be laid, and that kind of planted the seed for the story. And I was just really curious to kind of hear more about that and hear more about what the restoration plans were exactly. And so I was able to catch up with Dave Kaufman, who is the head of RES, which is the company that the restoration group has picked to do to spearhead the restoration aspect of dam removal, and then caught up with Mark Bransom, of the Klamath River Renewal Corporation, to talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of dam removal, and then Joshua Chenoweth from the Yurok tribe about some of the efforts the tribe has undertaken to kind of aid the restoration efforts. And the goal of the story was really to give kind of a comprehensive look of what this project is. I think a lot of people, it's kind of been in the works for so long. A lot of people have distilled it down to the bumper sticker that says "Undam the Klamath," and it seems kind of like a simple extraction procedure where you show up at the dentist and maybe they numb you up a little bit, but they take your tooth out and send you on your way. And as I say in the story, it's kind of much more akin to like a major surgery, where there's like a lot of preparation that goes into it. The surgery itself is pretty involved, and then there's a lot of rehabilitation and kind of post-op work.
A lot of detail in this article, a lot of moving pieces in what's going to be happening with the dam removal. And one of the things I came across that I had never heard of before is something called an Aquatic Resources Management Plan. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, that was one of the more fascinating pieces to me as well. So, as a part of the restoration aspect of the project, there's a number of things that RES has to do kind of ongoing, as far as monitoring, and then in monitoring efforts, and then obviously replanting a lot of native vegetation and stuff. But one of the things they have to do on the front end is kind of minimize impacts to aquatic species, and obviously there are going to be impacts to aquatic species. They're kind of drastically reshaping this river and the way it's been for the last century. And one of the things that they need to do is there are in the reservoirs behind 3 of the dams. There are endangered suckerfish, 2 different species, and species that are of great cultural significance to the Klamath area tribes upriver. And so when these suckerfish mostly subside in these reservoirs and can't really survive in a flowing cold river, and so one of the things they have to do is take protective efforts for these suckerfish. And so starting in a couple weeks, they've done a lot of testing, kind of laid the groundwork for this. But starting in a couple weeks, they'll have these crews going out at night with these massive nets to net and trap these suckerfish that can live up to 30 years. And the idea is they're going to trap 600 of them from behind 2 of the dams, and from behind 3 of the dams, and tag them and weigh them and kind of do this data entry, assign them a specific number so that they can be tracked, and then they're going to take them to either the National Fish Hatchery or a hatchery run by the Klamath tribes. And the idea is then they'll propagate them in these hatcheries and then relocate them to other areas where they will be able to survive and hopefully flourish.
And so the action this year, and I guess the only dam coming down is Copco 2, and it's going to be a process, obviously. But is there a feeling for completion of this project, or what the timeline is for completion of this project?
Yeah, so as far as the dams coming out, the goal and the idea and the plan is to have all 4 of them removed by October of 2024. And so basically by the time adult salmon come back into the river, come back into the watershed to spawn next year, that the dams will be gone and it'll be a free-flowing river. So there's a ton of, they're going to be very busy from now until then. As you said, the first dam to come out is the smallest, Copco 2, which will be removed this summer. And the reason that one is coming out first is basically it's fits with the construction plan that they have to bring a lot of really heavy equipment down to that section of the river to prepare the Copco 1 reservoir to be drawn down. They basically need to bore a tunnel through the base of that dam, which is just upriver from Copco 2. And so they figured while they have all that equipment on the river bar, they might as well just take out Copco 2 as well.
Okay, I've got a question, and this you may not know the answer to this, but
Okay.
What I wondered about was they're going to be removing an awful lot of concrete and soil and other debris, and I'm just wondering, do you know where that ends up? Where does all that go?
Yeah, so as far as the concrete and steel and that kind of stuff, they've already have designated disposal grounds for it. I don't know exactly where those are, but they have secured, I think it's 4 different places where they're going to be offloading this tremendous amount of concrete and other debris and materials. And then for the fill soil and some of the earthen materials that are going to be removed, a lot of those are going to be deposited back on 2 sites near the dam infrastructure. One to fill a spillway that has caused a lot of erosion next to Iron Gate Dam, and then another to basically backfill a hillside that was dug into and cleared out in order to bring all of the earthen material needed to create Iron Gate Dam. And so there's this hillside that was basically cut into and lopped off, and they're going to fill that back in with all this dirt that was taken from it a century ago, and then they're going to revegetate that hillside and hopefully restore it to a somewhat near a natural state.
Fabulous. Any final thoughts on this story?
Just that there's a tremendous amount of detail in going into this effort on all sides, and I think I walked away from researching and reporting the story with a much deeper appreciation for what they're trying to do and really the magnitude of this project. And so I urge people not just to read the story, but really follow the project on its way through, because it is a really significant undertaking.
Boy, is it ever. And there's a tremendous amount of detail in your article too, and I really do encourage people to pick it up and find out all of the great, interesting details on that.
Yeah,
Thanks. Thank you, Thad.
Thank you.
So let's turn to Jennifer. Jennifer, what is happening on the arts and features beat this week?
Many eco-groovy things, Matt, including the rise of Maker's Apron. So I don't know if you ever, well, you know what? You have, I bet, because you are a crafty person. I know about your secret sculptures, Matt. I know
Right.
you've probably been over to Scrap Humboldt, right?
Well, I guess the cat's out of the bag, so
The cat is out of the bag. He's a closet crafter.
I'll just
step into the light. So back in the day, you could go to Scrap Humboldt over in the Arcata, over, where was it? Over towards the
It's by the Arcata Marsh on South G Street.
near the marsh.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it was near some sort of outdoorsy thing. Anyway, so over there were like, oh my God, you could just have a feast of like random buttons, little bottles, glitter, all kinds of paper. One time I went in there and there were all these x-rays of animals from a vet's office. It was crazy. So you could go in there and repurpose all kinds of stuff. They would help you with things. They had classes. It was fantastic. And when the pandemic hit, we were all very sad to lose it. Scrap just couldn't stay afloat without having its doors open and having a shop that customers could come into. Now, just before that happened, Katie, Texas took over heading up Scrap, and she was so excited. As she put it, she knew the job was meant for her because she said her mission in life is making sure no crayon melts go to waste. And and Katie's had her hands in all kinds of artistic things happening all over the county. Anywhere you go, if you see murals, if you see things like that, you're probably looking at something that Katie, Texas was involved in at some point. So, you know, she took over with all this enthusiasm, and then COVID crushed her tiny dreams. But did it? Because while we were all rending our garments and crying into our glue sticks, Katy, Texas was already working on bringing Scrap Humboldt back in some other form. So on the one hand, RIP Scrap Humboldt. But on the other hand, maybe don't RIP. Maybe rise up from the ashes and stalk the earth again as Maker's Apron, because that's what Katy, Texas did. She basically stocked away all those shelves, like had people who helped her and put away all the storage stuff and rebuilt it. But as a different, more focused kind of a project with classes and things like that over in Eureka on East Street, kind of over where that like, kind of near Sea Grill, you know, and you can go in there and the shelves are stocked. One of the things that she had on the shelves were gnome kits. Like you, for $5, you could get like corks and other things and directions on making your own gnomes. You just like push that toward the kids.
I want to do that.
Right? Something to give your anxious friend. Color this.
And then I could take it on a trip around the world.
Yes, that's right. That's where it begins. A gnome is born, a journey is born. So Matt, for example, can roll up into Maker's Apron and he can get help with projects. He can, you know, get to know other people who are doing projects. He can hoard supplies. And the cool thing is that it's not just, you know, you go in and you look at stuff and you figure out what to do. It's also sort of inspiring because you think, oh, wait, I have a ton of this stuff at home, but I never really looked at it as art materials before. But when you see things out of those contexts, you're like, okay, this is kind of great. There's information. Tamar Burris wrote a great story on this and interviewed Katie about her work and kind of the evolution of the space. And you can check it out. The store is open Thursdays through Saturdays from 11 to 6. And also during Arts Alive, you can head over and see what's going on. They'll always have something going on, like some sort of craft class or something. And you can go to makersapron.org for updates and how to donate stuff. Because yes, if your child is no longer deeply into pipe cleaners, maybe somebody else's child is.
That's right. I was going to ask. So, Scrap Humboldt was a place that you could rehome your gross of bunny-shaped erasers, and so they're going to be doing
Exactly.
this
That was
the same
you.
thing. Yeah, mea culpa.
They're all at
Yeah.
my house now.
Oh, well, okay. I'm glad they found a good home. And
But yes, you can drop them at Maker's Apron. You just need to arrange a time and everything with them.
and we should probably mention that this is a project, a Dreammaker project of the Ink People.
That's right. Just like everything else cool that happens in Humboldt County, it is a Dreammaker project for the Ink People.
Cool. So in the few minutes that we have left, you also have a restaurant review or two.
Well, not exactly
Of sorts.
Sort of. So perhaps you have heard of Surfrider.
I have.
I have heard a lot about Surfrider because Jen Savage, who is a frequent contributor to the journal over the years, works for them. And anyway, she is a person that when I go out to meet her for food, I have to kind of like be careful and be like, okay, I'm not going to ask for a straw. I'm not going to, right? And I don't want to like shame myself in front of Jen Savage. I hide any styrofoam that might be around the office when she stops by. Not that there's no styrofoam. Anyway,
we'll be checking. We're gonna be checking on that.
So I saw, by sort of poking around and stalking her, that Surfrider actually has a restaurant program. And that program kind of gives the Surfrider seal of approval, noting them as ocean-friendly restaurants if they meet certain criteria. It's a pretty big list. There's like 7 things that you absolutely have to do, which include like not using styrofoam, not handing out plastic straws, etc. And then there's a list of 8 optional things like serving vegetarian and vegan food as an option, making sure that you don't even have bioplastic, because apparently bioplastic, I'm really sorry to tell you guys, apparently it doesn't just like degrade into nothing, it's still plastic. I'm sorry, sea turtles. I feel bad about some ice cream spoons that I've used. Anyway, but weirdly, even though, as I learned, most of the requirements in Humboldt County and in California at large regarding plastic bags, straws, etc., are already in line with most of the Surfrider requirements. But there are only 2 restaurants in our county who are officially Surfrider approved ocean friendly restaurants, and that is Six Rivers Brewery and Jippo Ale Mill down in Shelter Cove. So I spoke to the owners of both, or co-owner in Meredith's case. Meredith Mayer of Six Rivers Brewery kind of walked me through how they made their choices, everything from these really cool straws made of agave that break down really easily, but also kind of look like weird pasta, and how they want to bring back their composting of table scraps, but it's expensive, kind of what the easy parts and what the challenges were of adopting all of these things. And for her, as for Julie Peacock, who owns Jippo Ale Mill, things were sort of naturally happening anyway. They weren't doing styrofoam, they weren't doing all of these things. And probably more restaurants could end up on that map. Previously, they used to charge, I think it was like somewhere around $100 a year. They used to charge for the certification, but now they don't. So you kind of fill out the forms on the Surfrider website and somebody comes and makes sure that you're actually doing all the things you're saying. And then you are approved for that and you get to slap the ocean friendly sticker on there. Some of that includes like where you get your seafood. Some of it includes, how you manage your recycling. There are a lot of things, but they're kind of helpful for people to know because, I know for me, when you sit down at a restaurant, you're like, I can't remember which of this fish is evil. You look at it and you're like, I can't remember. Is this the fish that's going to kill me because of mercury, or is it the fish that's going to kill the planet because we're overfishing it? It's helpful to know that the people who are running the kitchen are already making those considerations and that your options in front of you are basically brought to you by someone who is doing the best they can. And, I'm all for individual responsibility, but that doesn't always make up for, regulation. Regulation is nice. But Jen Savage pointed out to me that, in fact, the more ocean-friendly restaurants are sort of listed, the more it kind of shows that business people care about this stuff, that and business people being a very strong political voice, and that it is financially viable to do so. Some of it will end up actually, costing a little more, but some of it will end up saving you money down the road. So I hope that people will check this out and at least think about some of the requirements and think about, okay, so when I go into a restaurant, do I actually need forks and spoons when I get takeout? Probably not if I'm taking it home, right? One of the things that I like is at Jippo Ale Mill, Julie Peacock offers for $6 if you're like picnicking out with their food, if you're doing it takeaway, you can buy for $6 a little bamboo fork, knife, and spoon set that comes in a little pouch. And then you have a travel fork, knife, and spoon set, which, personal testimony, is a good idea to have. I always have forks, knives, and spoons with me. Is that weird, Thad?
Yeah, not weird at all.
Yeah.
Well, I think the lesson there is BYOF.
Yes. As I always do.
I think this is great. And, I go to restaurants and the food is terrific, or you get takeaway but then it's in styrofoam or some other plastic, or your coffee, like an outfit like, well, I won't name any names.
Stop it.
Puts it in plastic, it's just it's kind of a turnoff, and it's great to hear that somebody is doing something about it and that people are actually care about this kind of stuff. And it sounds like sustainable is getting cheaper too because of the regulations that have been adopted. A lot of restaurants have to use this stuff now, so it's getting cheaper to do.
And people are demanding it. I mean, I know every time we post something from like a food truck with like a styrofoam tray in it or something, I get a million messages from people saying, how can you promote this? They're using styrofoam, etc. During the pandemic, it was tough because as Meredith points out, not everything was available all the time and people were sort of grabbing whatever they could. But, as a consumer, it matters to people, matters to me, matters to, I think, most people, what their food comes in.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the story, Jen.
Thank you.
Well, that's about all the time we have today for North Coast Journal Preview. North Coast Journal is on newsstands now, also online 24/7. Get out there, pick up some copies, and hand them out to your friends and neighbors. Thad and Jen, thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Matt.
See you next week.